Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 6th chapter, text number 1. Brahmo Vacha Vacham Vaknirmukham Kshetram Chandasam Saptadhatavaha Havyakavyamritannanam Jikhva Sarvarasasya Cha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Lord Brahma said, the mouth of the Virat Purusha, the universal form of the Lord, is the generating center of the voice, and the controlling deity is fire. His skin and 6 other layers are the generating centers of the Vedic hymns, and his tongue is the productive center of different foodstuffs and delicacies for offering to the demigods, the forefathers, and the general mass of people. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The opulences of the universal form of the Lord are described herein. It is said that his mouth is the generating center of all kinds of voices, and its controlling deity is the fire demigod. And his skin and other 6 layers of bodily construction are the representative generating centers of the 7 kinds of Vedic hymns like the Gayatri. Gayatri is the beginning of all Vedic mantras, and it is explained in the 1st volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. Since the generating centers are the different parts of the universal form of the Lord, and since the form of the Lord is transcendental to the material creation, it is to be understood that the voice, the tongue, the skin, etc. suggest that the Lord in his transcendental form is not without them. The material voice, or the energy of taking in foodstuff, is generated originally from the Lord. Such actions are but perverted reflections of the original reservoirs. The transcendental situation is not without spiritual variegatedness. In the spiritual world, all the perverted forms of material variegatedness are fully represented in their original spiritual identity. The only difference is that material activities are contaminated by the 3 modes of material nature, whereas the potencies in the spiritual world are all pure because they are engaged in the unalloyed transcendental loving service of the Lord. In the spiritual world, the Lord is the sublime enjoyer of everything, and the living entities there are all engaged in his transcendental loving service without any contamination of the modes of material nature. The activities in the spiritual world are without any of the inebrities of the material world, but there is no question of impersonal voidness on the spiritual platform as suggested by the impersonalists. Devotional service is defined in the Narada Pancharatra as follows. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. Originally, since all the senses are produced of the Lord's reservoir of senses, the sensual activities of the material world are to be purified with the process of devotional service, and thus the perfection of life can be attained simply by purifying the present position of our material activities. And the purifying process begins from the stage of being liberated from the conception of different designations. Every living entity is engaged in some sort of service, either for the self or for the family or for the society, country, etc. But unfortunately, all such services are rendered due to material attachment. The attachments of the material affinity may be simply changed to the service of the Lord, and thus the treatment of being freed from material attachment begins automatically. The process of liberation is therefore easier through devotional service than by any other methods. For in the Bhagavad Gita 12.5, it is said that one is subjected to various kinds of tribulations if one is impersonally attached. Klesho dikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam. This ends the Bhaktivedanta purport.
The service is defined in the Narada Pancharatra as follows. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tattaratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchyate. Originally, since all the senses are produced of the Lord's reservoir of senses, the sensual activities of the material world are to be purified by the process of devotional service. And thus the perfection of life can be attained simply by purifying the present position of our material activities. And the purifying process begins from the state of being liberated from the conception of different designations. Every living entity is engaged in some sort of service. Jai Shri Nitai Gauranga Shri Radha Vrindavan. And the purifying process begins from the stage of being liberated from the conception of different designations. Every living entity is engaged in some sort of service, either for the self, or for the family, or for the society, country, etc. But unfortunately, all such services are rendered due to material attachment. The attachments of the material affinity may be simply changed to the service of the Lord, and thus the treatment of being freed from material attachment begins automatically. The process of liberation is therefore easier through devotional service than by any other methods. For in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that one is subjected to various kinds of tribulations if one is impersonally attached. Klesho dikarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om ajnanatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya Chakshurmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is a new chapter, which is Lord Brahma speaking, and he is further describing the position of the Virat Rupa of the Lord. So he is describing here Vacham Vahne Mukham Kshetram Chandasam Saptathatavaha. Vacham, words, voice, and its controlling deity Vahni, fire. Vacham Vahne Mukham Kshetram comes from the Mukha, from the mouth of Virat Rupa. Chandasam Saptathatavaha. Chandasam, referring to the Vedic hymns, meters, such as Gayatri. And Prabhupada has mentioned that there are 7 kinds of Vedic hymns, beginning with Gayatri. And they come from the Saptathatavaha. There are 7 layers, it is described. Prabhupada has not mentioned what the 7 layers are. Like the skin. So skin is 1 layer, the 6 will be. So these different layers, maybe it's described elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, or Prabhupada's purports. So in the 7 layers of the body of universal form, from there the 7 Vedic hymns have come. Havya kavyamritannana amritannana amritannana jihva sarva rasasya cha. From the impersonal forms, jihva, from the tongue of the, from the universal, tongue of the universal form of the Lord. Havya, kavya, amrita, annana. Havya is oblations, offerings made to the devotees, and kavya is offerings made to the forefathers, pitrus, and amrita is the food for the human beings. Anna, sarva rasasya, and all the different delicacies have come from jihva cha. So Lord Brahma said, the mouth of the Virat Purusha, Mukham Kshetram, is the generating center of the voice, Vacham, and the controlling deity is fire, Vahnehe. His skin and 6 other layers, Saptadhatavaha, are the generating centers of the Vedic hymns, Chandasam Saptadhatavaha. And his tongue, Jihva, is the productive center of the different foodstuffs and delicacies. Anna, Sarva Rasasya, for the offering to the demigods, Havya, the forefathers, Kavya, and the general mass of people, Amrita, Anna. And then Srila Prabhupada has written very nicely in the purport, describing further about the transcendental situation. That's the word Prabhupada has used. The transcendental situation is not without spiritual dedicatedness. So the transcendental situation means something that is beyond this. There is one place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Prabhupada describes. Yesterday we have celebrated Nityananda's appearance day. So, in the purport, Prabhupada describes that Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, by worshipping them, 5 kinds of ignorance of the living entity is destroyed. And then Prabhupada describes the 5 kinds of ignorance of the conditioned soul are described in the Mahabharata. So that's the source. So what are these 5 kinds of ignorance of the conditioned soul? Prabhupada explains. The first kind of ignorance is misidentification of the self in the body. So this is one of the ignorances in this material world. All conditioned souls think that we are the body. Not only in India, everywhere in the world, go and see, there is the same kind of ignorance. I am the body. So this is the first ignorance of the conditioned soul. The second ignorance is actually all of them, the second, third, fourth, are all actually outcome of the first ignorance. But the second ignorance is to make material sense gratification as the standard of enjoyment. We all want enjoyment because we are persons. A person is always looking for enjoyment. And in the material world, the conditioned soul, out of ignorance, thinks material sense gratification is the standard of enjoyment. That is the standard that we must aspire. And in that, there are higher standards or lower standards of material enjoyment. And by our hard work, we should try to accomplish higher standards of material sense gratification. This is also true, not only in India, everywhere in the world. They are trying to. That is the standard of happiness that everywhere all people in the world pursue. The third ignorance of the conditioned soul is and being anxious due to material identification. So, material identification brings anxiety because that is not the natural situation. So, being anxious due to material identification is the third ignorance. Prabhupada gives this example from his Jaladuta days experience. When Prabhupada was traveling in the Jaladuta for 35 days, and sometimes when you are in the ocean, in the ship, suddenly there will be storm, rain, thunder, lightning, fierce rain, and the ship is tossing, you see, and it creates anxiety. I remember once when here in Delhi, we were in that ashram near IIT.
Sarvodaya.
One day, it was a small, we were all sharing rooms. Sugyanta and I were in the same room, and he was sleeping. I think he was sleeping on the floor. Even all of us were sleeping on the floor, I think. It was an office, and office becomes, after everybody goes, it becomes our sleeping place. So he had already slept, and it was about 10:30 maybe. And I was still doing something on the computer or reading something. And suddenly there was a tremor. Delhi. And I startled. And I heard voices in the neighbors screaming, "Ah!" Men, women. And dogs started barking. Dogs got disturbed. And then I looked what Sugyanta is doing. He just crossed over. I was also a little bit disturbed, but he was deep asleep, I think. He just tossed over and continued to sleep. It was for a few seconds. It was startling. Because by our experience, this is very stable ground. You put your feet there, you know this is the source of stability. That's the conviction. And that itself is not shaking. Right? When you are in a train, train shakes, you understand, it's not a stable thing. Or you're in a car or in a bus, it's not a stable thing, you're used to, you expect that little bit of, your platform on which you're standing will shake. But a platform, this platform you're standing on, never will shake. That's our confidence. And that shakes. Oh, we are in anxiety. And imagine you are in a ship and the ship is tossing. You see, the things all, if you get something on the table, it'll slip this side, slip that side. You have to hold on. And that goes on for an hour. And you're in the ship, to see the big waves that are there. And you just imagine how deep the water is. And from that scale, you're like a one small cup or something in the ocean of water. And people are in anxiety. I don't know if there is some devotee here. I know one devotee in our group, in our temple. He works for merchant navy. And then he tells that there's to work in the merchant navy. He's a captain. He became a captain recently. Initiated devotee. And he gets a big salary. He comes and gives a lot of donation to our temple. And he's also a donor of our Buddha temple. So he tells that when they are in the ship, they get their salary is X. And when they are in the ship, their salary is 2X. X itself is very big. Because the risks are involved. And you have to go through all that. And then he was saying, sometimes in the ship they carry petroleum. Huge. So you can imagine, ship full of petroleum, cylinders or whatever, tanks, and they carry. Very risky. And there is fire in the ship because there is a kitchen. You have to eat it every day. And there is fire in the boilers. And you're carrying petroleum. And when you're carrying petroleum, the salary is 8x. So option is given. If you want, you can, this is a ship carrying ship. You like to, and people think 8x. Okay, let's go. So you can imagine ship itself is anxiety, cause of anxiety, and they are carrying petroleum. And then he was describing, then we go through these anxious moments and tossing and all of that, and then finally the ship comes to the destination and docks on the port, and then we come out of the ship and come back to the land. We feel free from that anxious moment. You see? Then Prabhupada gives this example from his Jaladuta experience. And he says, we as human beings, we are terrestrial beings. If we are in the water, we will be anxious. Because it's not natural for us. In the same way, we are spiritual beings. Being in the material world is not natural for us. And that is why it is full of anxiety. We become anxious in this world. Because in this world, things are temporary, things are tottering, it's never stable. Kamala dala jala, jivana thala. Kamala dala jala, jivana thala. So it is tottering. Life is very, very risky. You have a nice family, you become attached to wife, children, husband, father, mother, brother, sister, business. But you don't know when, what can happen. Like we are reading in the newspapers, in the news about the coronavirus. So people are locked up in that province in China, they can't come out. Now I read somewhere the government of that province has sought permission from the court if they can kill 20,000 people. Should we maintain them? And they will spread the disease. Shall we kill them? And that will free up the hospitals. Then it can take 20,000 more patients. So the dilemma, they see the anxiety. So this world is a place of anxiety. Being anxious. And the Shastras are describing this is due to ignorance of the conditioned soul. It is a fact. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes, many times say, especially in the 77, what is there? I've already described, told you many times, this body will end. This body will end. But spiritual life will continue. If not here, in some other place. So why are you all anxious? Prabhupada would speak so casually. But for us who are attached to this material life, to this world, oh my God, life will end. In anxiety. Doctors always say, suppose when somebody is diagnosed cancer, usually doctors will call the family members and ask, this is the thing, do you think we can tell him? Tell the patient? Or do you think we should not tell the patient? The patient will take it properly, because sometimes people become filled with anxiety. Sometimes they don't tell, the family members decide. No, we will just say you've got stomach pain. It's not stomach pain. It's ulcers, gastro, cancer or something. So like this, this world puts us in anxiety. So this is the third ignorance. The fourth ignorance is experiencing lamentation. We lament in this world. Something we don't have, or something that we have lost it, and we lament about it. And the fifth kind of ignorance is to consider that anything exists besides the absolute truth. Because nothing exists besides the absolute truth. Ekam eva dvitiyam. Only one thing exists, and that is absolute truth. This is Chandogya Upanishad. So only one thing exists, absolute truth, Paratattva. Nothing else. Well, then the misunderstanding comes. Oh, only one thing exists. That's what the Upanishad is saying. But we are all existing, no? We are all one, that one absolute truth. This is the impersonal conclusion. Or this material world, varieties exist, difference exists, dualities exist. This is all illusion, and only thing is that void. So either voidness or impersonalism. These are simply little slight variation of the description of the same thing. You see? And so, something that is transcendental, beyond this material existence, is not neither impersonal nor is it void. So, these are the 5 kinds of ignorance, and Nitai Gaur, by worshipping Nitai Gauranga, the living entity can be freed from these 5 kinds of ignorance that Prabhupada describes. So, Prabhupada is using this example to say here that all these different things exist. We have tongue, we have voice, we have taste, we relish food, and all of these are coming from, all this material existence has come from the universal form of the Lord. And the universal form of the Lord has come from the transcendental form of the Lord. And hence, if the transcendental form of the Lord is not without variegatedness, the transcendental form of the Lord also has, transcendental existence also has varieties. And all of the transcendental existence is of the same transcendental substance, and hence it is called Ekameva Dvitiyam. Although it is one transcendental existence, there are variegatedness, and all of them are one. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shakti Vadanti Tattva Vidastattvam Yajnanam Advayam. There is no duality, there is no difference. So that means that the There are the living entity is there and the Lord is there. There's no difference? Yeah, in one sense there is no difference. Both are personalities, both are conscious entities. Both are transcendental to material nature. Even we, in our constitution, we are transcendental to material nature. That is why we are apare vitastva anya. We are prakriti anya. We are not part of the prakriti, material nature. We are anyas, apart from the material nature. We are a particle of transcendental nature. And there is the supreme transcendental nature. And there is the supreme transcendental existence, the spiritual world. So otherwise, how do we explain? Just see how we all have two eyes, one nose, 2 ears, one mouth, 2 hands, 2 legs, we walk like this. And we have these sense perceptions, we hear, taste, we smell, we see forms. How did all this come about? What was why not 3 eyes? Why not 4 eyes somewhere? 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Life would have been different that time. Maybe less accidents from beginning. Whatever.
More confused.
More confused. Which way to go? So, why are the forms like the way they are? Why 2 kinds of human beings? Male and female. You just imagine there is only one kind of human being. And all of us at some time will give birth to one child. So, everyone will give birth, one perpetuation to happen. Alright. But why this male form and a female form and attractions and all kinds of complications? Oh, this car, so difficult. It is just one ashram. No need to worry, no maya, no attraction, nothing. Why this? Why not 3 kinds of human beings? Male, female, and one more. Red, green, blue, or whatever. Some other name we could have given. Why not 4 kinds? Why not 5 kinds? Only 2 kinds. Male form, female form. So, there is a transcendental male and there is a transcendental female. And there is a pleasure in the male and the female coming together in the transcendental domain. Krishna is the transcendental male and Srimati Radharani is the transcendental female. His own pleasure energy. So is Radharani different? No, it is his own energy. And Shakti Matayor Abhinna. There is no difference between Shakti and Shaktimati. Shaktiman. Shakti Matayor Abhinna. So this is the transcendental situation. So Prabhupada is saying, the transcendental situation is not without spiritual variegatedness. In the spiritual world, all the perverted forms of material variegatedness are fully represented in their original spiritual identity. Very beautiful description by Prabhupada. The only difference is that material activities are contaminated by the 3 modes of material nature, whereas the potencies in the spiritual world are all pure. Why? Because they are engaged in the unalloyed, transcendental, loving service of the Lord. That is the position. So when we say there is nothing but only the absolute truth exists. Yes, there is only absolute truth. Everything else is the absolute truth. And why do we talk about Panchatattva? When Srila Prabhupada explains in many places in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and once when Srila Prabhupada was establishing Panchatattva deities in Hawaii temple, on the day of the inauguration of the temple, Prabhupada explains that. What is this Panchatattva? Tattva means the truth. Right? 5 truths. The first truth is the Ishvara Tattva. That is the Supreme Lord Krishna, and represented when he appeared here in this world as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The second Tattva is the Tattva called Prakasha Tattva. It is the first expansion. And it is this first expansion which helps us to understand the first Tattva. And that is why it is known as Prakasha Tattva. And that is Balaram, who appeared as Nityananda Prabhu. So without Balaram's mercy, we cannot understand Krishna. Without Nityananda's mercy, we cannot understand Krishna. And all the acharyas, the spiritual master, is a representation of Nityananda Prabhu, because Nityananda is the Prakasha Tattva, and all spiritual masters are helping us to understand what is that Paratattva. Then there is the Avatara Tattva, which is represented by Advaita Acharya, or Vishnu, who enters into this material world. Vishnu means one who enters this material existence. So, Avatara Tattva. And the fourth Tattva is the Shakti Tattva. Parasya Shakti Vividhayo Shruyate. That absolute truth has many Shaktis. So that Shakti, an emanation from the Lord, is the Shakti Tattva, the fourth Tattva. And the Shakti Tattva is also, there are internal energy and external energy tattvas. And the internal energies, among the internal energies, that energy which gives pleasure to the Lord, to the first Tattva, Ishvara Tattva, is Radharani. And that is to be liberated from this upadhis. I am man, I am woman, I am human, I am Indian, I am various, I am young man, I am old man. This is a deep conception that we all have. Right? In the night we will be sleeping, and in the sleep maybe we will be dreaming, I'm king, I'm this, I'm that, I'm rich man. And suddenly the alarm goes, and then we wake up and say, oh no, I'm not the king, I'm this. We'll come to another upadhi, which we are used to, which is also not what we are. You see? So, Sarva Upadhi Vinirmuktam is the liberated state. And the purifying process begins from the stage of being liberated from the conception of different designations. Every living entity is engaged in some sort of service, either for the self, or for the family, or for the society, country, etc. But unfortunately, all such services are rendered due to material attachment. The attachments of the material affinity may simply be changed to the service of the Lord, and thus the treatment of being freed from the material attachment begins automatically. So that tat paratvena, paratvena means to be connected with the Supreme. And in this way, Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam, engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, the process of liberation is therefore easier through devotional service than by any other methods. For in the Bhagavad Gita it is said that one is subjected to various kinds of tribulations if one is impersonally attached. So this is the purport of this verse, that how we should be free from the upadis and paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam, and that is bhakti. This is known as bhakti. So this is the transcendental position. Is not free from, is not impersonal or void. It is full of spiritual variegatedness. Just like there is voice, there is taste, there is form. And the forms and the taste and everything that we see here is a reflection of the spirit, what is the variegatedness in the spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, everything is paratvena. Here it is for ourselves, we are trying to enjoy. There everything is for this transcendental Lord, for para. We'll stop here.